Welcome to the Energy Show. I'm journalist Markham. The working title for today's show is How Canada Can Become a Green Steel Superpower. My guest is one of my go-to energy economists, Chris Bataille, who has co-authored a new paper, Strategic Decarbonisation of the Canadian Iron and Steel Industry, with Jonas Algers of Lund University. It's an interesting paper, but why should you care? The answer is that Canada can attract billions of dollars of investment and create up to 14,000 good paying jobs by processing iron here instead of exporting it raw, the way we do now. This is the same strategy Energy Media proposes in its Canada 2050 campaign. Check it out at canada-2050.com. Read the open letter to the Prime Minister and sign the petition. You can even record a video about why you support Canada 2015. Now, before we get to the interview with Dr. Bataille, please consider becoming a YouTube member supporting Energy Media's journalism. I'll put a link to the memberships in the YouTube description. Now, it's time for the interview. Welcome back to the Energy Show, Chris.
Oh, great to see you, Markham. How are you doing?
I'm doing just great, and judging by the fact that you've cranked out this 66-page paper on a very technical subject, I think you've been a busy lad. Hats off to you. Now, what we're talking about is creating green steel in Canada because we have competitive advantages to doing so, and you know that Energy Media has created the Canada 2050 campaign, and which has a three-point strategy. And the first one is, drum roll, please, add value to raw resources. This
Yep.
seems perfectly suited to that. Would you mind just give us a brief overview of the paper, please?
Yeah, no, so this was a fun little project that started about a year ago with a colleague of mine, Jonas Algers from Lund University, who was completing his PhD at that point in time. We were at a steel meeting, and we were talking about Sweden, which has been experimenting with 100% hydrogen DRI to convert their coal-driven blast furnace fleet over to 100% hydrogen. And, they've got the first pilot facilities have been built, and larger ones are being built. And we remarked on the incredible similarity between the Canada and specifically Quebec and the Labrador Trough and the situation in Sweden. So we started mapping the two against each other and realized this is something we should put into a report, right? And basically, the idea was that Quebec quietly has one of probably the third or fourth largest iron ore mining and export industry in the world. They ship out very high quality iron ore that happens to be perfectly suitable for one of the technologies for decarbonizing the steel industry. Now, they send out this iron ore unprocessed. It leaves the Labrador Trough right in between Newfoundland and Quebec. It goes by rail down to Sept-Îles in Quebec, gets on a boat, and then heads out around the world. Our question was, could you upgrade that, upvalue that iron ore on site? So you use this hydrogen DRI technology. You don't use their dams. The dams are just there for firming, but you add extra wind to provide the extra electricity. There's lots of resources in those mountains around in Labrador. And you want to keep those dams full. We don't want to hurt Hydro-Quebec's balancing or balance sheet or anything else, right? We use that to make hydrogen to reduce that iron ore. We turn it and we take that solid sponge elemental iron, we compress it into briquettes. We send it down to Sept-Îles by train, put it on boats. It can then be shipped around the world. And the beauty of that is you don't need blast furnaces then in Hamburg, in Dunkirk, or other places in Europe, or even China. You put this metallized iron straight into an electric arc furnace, which can then make steel purely with electricity, and you can make high quality, fully decarbonized steel from this. So it's the opportunity to basically triple or quadruple the value of that iron ore, the value out of that iron ore, increase the value of our exports, send it elsewhere, like as opposed to the States, and provide, I think we calculated about 25 billion extra value added, more exports, and about 14,000 new jobs between Newfoundland and Quebec in terms of the electricity and the mining. But the beauty of this strategy would be we could also use that iron ore to decarbonize the steel industry in Ontario. So it provides a ready-made way to decarbonize steel production in Canada as opposed to trying to install gas-driven DRI units in Hamilton. Sorry, go ahead.
ArcelorMittal in Hamilton already installed an electric arc furnace a year or two ago
Yes. Yes.
because it had federal and Ontario government funding. So, if I understand this correctly, the those briquettes that would be created in Quebec and Newfoundland would then be shipped down to that furnace in Hamilton,
Yes.
and boom, you've got yourself high quality steel.
You've got yourself vehicle grade steel to make cars. Exactly. This isn't low quality scrap structural steel. This is the premium stuff. And it provides a means to shift upgrade to so upshift the Canadian steel decarbonization, decarbonization of the steel industry, as well as providing all this extra value added in Quebec, right? So those are the two things we focused on. But then we thought about if strategies like this got followed globally, what does that mean for the Canadian metallurgical coal industry in
Oh,
Western Canada?
okay.
Right. So that's the third part. That's the third part of the report. And we look at where all the metallurgical coal is coming from, the communities that depend on it, what have you, and then try to think about when do they have to worry about demand falling for their product? It's high quality stuff, but they're not the lowest cost producer nor the largest producer. That's Australia, right? So eventually, if the steel industry decarbonizes in one way or another, it's probably going to be without coal. CCS doesn't seem to be working all that well for coal-driven steel making. We are looking at a long-term problem for those communities and for BC. But you're also looking at much lower emissions, sort of scope 3 emissions for BC at the same time. So that's the essence of the report. And we get into the jobs figures, the export and value added, and what have you. But it's a three-pronged strategy. And the key thing to get this all going is that we need demand. So we need preferential and green procurement from the federal and provincial governments for our infrastructure, and then help get setting up this supply chain. So from Quebec to Hamilton, Quebec to Hamburg, and what have you. But it's a long term. Like it doesn't have to be done all at once. You can do unit by unit, and it's something you can experiment with, see if the demand's there for it. But it's a flexible strategy that gives us alternative exports and another pathway for the steel industry.
I have to say, I mean, we spent a lot of time here at Energy Media understanding industrial policy within the clean energy manufacturing context. And this sounds exactly like it is custom made for an industrial strategy and policy approach. And the ones that have been used successfully in Europe and used successfully in China, other parts of Asia. I mean, this is industrial policy. We're just coming to the game late here in Canada, the sort of modern industrial policy. But the Asian country, China in particular, has been doing it for 20 years in in electric vehicles and batteries. And how do we think that they got to where they are with these giant automated factories that turn out EVs and what have you? It's because the government was played a role and along with the private sector. So can't this perfect example of what we could do? Do we have the policy making capacity within the federal and provincial governments to formulate such a strategy and the tools to put it into action?
That's the $1 trillion question, the hundreds of billions and $1 trillion question, to be honest. I think all the necessary components are there. I think you've got the people, you got the Canada Growth Fund, the various funds that are available at the federal level. The Quebec government has been quite good at this in the past, working with Hydro-Quebec. A lot of amazing research has emerged from Hydro-Quebec over the years. Lithium iron phosphate batteries was born in Hydro-Quebec, and then unfortunately it
Wow,
was lost and it went overseas and what have
no
you.
idea.
But I think between the Quebec provincial government, the feds, and Ontario working together and understanding, like we're in a new world right now where we have to think differently, and this is one of those strategies that it's almost like this could be our training wheels for learning how to do proper industrial policy.
In addition to that, there's a component to this paper that I really like because I've been saying for a long time that the power sector, electricity is the foundation of the 21st century economy. And Canada has such a clean grid, 84% clean. It's reliable. It's low cost, particularly in Quebec. I think it's like 7 cents a kilowatt hour. It's really cheap.
Hmm.
And that is such an enormous competitive advantage. enormous competitive advantage. And your suggestion by basically powering the new industry with wind, backed up, firmed up with
Yes,
hydro, firmed up with
yes.
hydro, not powered by hydro, just seems to be such a brilliant way of leveraging all the things that we do well, where we have a competitive advantage, to build this basically almost a new industry and create 14,000 jobs and who knows how much government revenue. And I really like your idea of treating this as a pilot project for a new approach to economic development around these new technologies.
Yeah, I think the opportunity is there. All the fundamental resources are there. You bring in you bring in the Innu and the Cree and the what have you as equity partners, like as we've done successfully here in Western. Actually, this was pioneered in Quebec, where an intense relationship has developed between the Quebec provincial government and the Innu, and they have their own airline now and all sorts of industries. And this could be just one other industry helping build all the renewables capacity needed to keep Hydro-Quebec whole in terms of their electricity supply and their capacity. But I think this is something that could go.
Yeah, I would agree. And let's get to talk a little bit more about First Nation and Indigenous community involvement here, because that and worker retraining, including workers right from the very beginning, is actually a central part of your paper.
Yeah, no, and this is interesting. I have to credit Jonas with this. He's the other author of the paper, the lead author. He's not here today because he had a baby yesterday. I saw a wonderful picture this morning.
Oh, isn't
Um,
that nice? We like babies
Yeah,
here in
exactly.
Media.
Um, yeah, no, so Jonas was very particular about centering this in a like a worker and community, like a worker and a community-centered strategy. So this is meant to leave those communities whole and build up those communities, build up the long term. He describes them as family supporting jobs, right? So, iron mining in northern Quebec pays more than almost anything else in the country for a blue collar worker, and it's something that they can plan on and do well for most of their career. As you work your way through the trades and what have you. So it's very much a community and a labor centered strategy meant to work with the companies, with the federal government, with the First Nations.
I'm going to go out on a limb here, Chris, and say that if there is an obstacle to this strategy being implemented, it's probably in policy inertia, political inertia within governments and even within the Canadian electorate. We've been in this hewers of wood, drawers of water mentality for 150 years, 300 or 400 if you really want to get into the Staples
Right.
thesis. And this is just how we do business. We think of strategies like this as being inherently too risky. We think we don't have the resources, the people power, the whatever to do it. Let's just sell our raw materials and keep doing what we've always done, and we'll manage. Maybe not as manage as well. Maybe we've missed an opportunity, but hey, we've missed lots of opportunities. What's one more? That in my opinion, would probably be the biggest impediment to doing what you suggested in the paper.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. Like we tell ourselves a lot of stories about how the Canadian economy developed, right? Like the fundamental reality is we've been labor short, capital short, but we have lots of resources and energy, right? So that's kind of how what we focused on to build up capital, to bring people here, bring labor here, what have you. And that psychology very much fit with the last 34 years of sort of the modern neoliberal era where you just let markets run, they'll sort it out for themselves, it'll all be fine. But really, our biggest jumps in industrialization did not occur that way. They occurred in the 1880s and 1890s when there was a purposeful strategy to build up manufacturing in Ontario and Quebec, and manufactured goods were sent to Western Canada. They cost more than American goods, but it built up the industry, and there was a back and forth, and there was conflicts involved with that. And then in two big phases with World War One and World War Two, which dramatically, and that was all industrial policy, hardcore industrial policy to build up
Right.
aviation, electronics, everything that goes with modern warfare at that point in time. We were the factory of the British, one of the biggest factories of the British Empire, and especially of aircraft, right? And we carried that on probably until the 1960s, and then we kind of lost our way a little bit and lost our way in terms of creating a vision of what industries we want to develop and support going forward. So this is closer to the history of how Canada has industrialized as opposed to the hewers of wood and drawers of water model.
You know what? I'm a little embarrassed to be honest. I was trained as a historian and did a lot of business history. This is 40 years ago. But that framing of Canadian industrialization, Canadian economic history is not one that I'm familiar with, and I should have been. And that's a fascinating way to look at it because the lesson that I would draw from that story, Chris, is that when we put our mind to it, we can do it.
Oh, we have, and we we have, and we can.
All we need is the impetus, and the impetus is in this case is Trump and the instability south of the border, because we now have economic instability in a way we haven't had. I can't remember the last time. Maybe it was World War II. But we seem to have a national consensus that we need to do things differently. We have a prime minister, sorry, who said the increasing integration with the American economy is stopped. We're dead. We're not doing that anymore. And one would think then that the federal government under Dr. Mark Carney, PhD in economics from Oxford, would be exactly this kind of thing. I mean, this fits. If there was ever a project custom designed for Mark Carney, this would be it. And the question then will become building the political constituency, the political support, the political capital to make it go forward, in my opinion.
Yeah, and it's going to take a lot of cooperation. The Quebec provincial government has to be on board, the Newfoundland government, the iron miners, the feds, the works, right? But this can be done. This is not outside our wheelhouse.
Well, not only that, I mean, let's talk about Edmonton because they're putting together a hydrogen hub there,
Yep.
where in effect they're in the early stages of doing the very thing you talked about. They've got all the governments, municipal governments, provincial government, even the federal government's at the table. It was actually the private sector and we'll call it civil society, was
Yeah.
the Industrial Heartland Association there that were the drivers of this, brought everybody together, got them talking, said, hey, we can do hydrogen here. We have a bunch of refineries in the area. They need hydrogen. So at the very least, we can replace gray hydrogen, which gets vented into the atmosphere, with green hydrogen produced from natural gas. And that's a big economic opportunity and it has all sorts of benefits to it. And that hub has been growing year after year after year. And really, it's kind of a model in a way for what you're talking about. Who takes the lead on it may be different, may have to be a government, but nevertheless, the idea of bringing all these stakeholders together and getting them organized in a strategic direction and building the support and then going and implementing a project, that's very similar to what Edmonton is doing.
I would not be surprised if 5 to 10 years from now, the Alberta provincial government is calling the Edmonton Fort Saskatchewan hub one of the world's first near zero emissions industrial hubs, right? It's got CCS, it'll have hydrogen, it's got all that clean electricity that eventually the wind and solar industry will come back to Alberta. The HVDC lines are there from southern Alberta and they land in Fort Saskatchewan. It's all there to happen.
Yes, it really is. And one of the problems we have here is that, and I know you spend, well, one of the reasons why I know is because I interview you a lot. And we've talked about the global energy transition, the shift to renewables and clean energy technologies like EVs and batteries and heat pumps and so on. And so people, I often get quizzed on social media, when I do a presentation, they say, well, how do you know what the future is going to hold? Look at the trends. Follow the curve, pal. It's, here's the data, here's the curves, here's the learning effect theory, here's, on and on and on. It really, when you take a hard look at it, the future is not as opaque as we think. We can kind of look out in the future and know what it's going to look like, right? And our Canada's ability to not get left behind when that future arrives depends on having these kinds of conversations, getting organized, and doing something about it.
Yeah, exactly. And having plans in mind, plans that can change, but plans in mind.
Indeed. Well, look, Chris, this is fascinating. Excellent paper. Really enjoy it. I'll put a link in the YouTube description for anybody who wants it, and we'll look forward to our next interview. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Mark. I'm looking forward to it.
Thanks for watching the show. We are on a mission to reach 10,000 subscribers and over 1 million views. If you're enjoying the content, give us a thumbs up, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to our channel. Thanks for being part of our community.